CF Moto are calling this the 2026 450MT. And naturally, that raises a big question. Is this actually a new bike, or is it the same 450MT that we already know, just carried over with a new model year on the paperwork? Right now, online there's a lot of confusion. Some people are holding off buying, some dealers are giving vague answers, and forums are full of speculation about updates that may or may not exist. So in this video, I want to clear all of that up properly. I'm going to go through what's actually confirmed, what's region specific, what's just rumour, and most importantly, whether waiting for the 2026 CF Moto 450MT actually makes sense if you're planning to ride this bike, especially off-road. So what is up guys, welcome back to another video. I'm Laurent, and before we even talk about the bike itself, it is important to understand what a model year actually means. So a new model year does not automatically mean a new motorcycle. Manufacturers regularly update model years for reasons like registration cycles, inventory planning, or emissions compliance, but that's all without changing the bike mechanically at all. So, when you see the 2026 450MT, that doesn't instantly mean CF Moto have redesigned the engine or changed the frame or even upgraded the suspension. And of course, in this case, based on everything that's publicly available right now, that is exactly what's happening. As things stand, the 2026 CF Moto 450MT is not a redesigned motorcycle. There are no confirmed changes to the engine, no confirmed changes to the frame, and no confirmed changes to the suspension, the electronics, or the overall performance. So if you're expecting more power, less weight, or a major technology jump, that simply isn't what the 2026 label represents. What you're looking at is really the same generation of a 450MT but carried forward into a new model year. Now that might sound disappointing to some people, but honestly it really shouldn't. The reason the 450MT has made such a big impact is because CF Moto has got the fundamentals right from the start. They didn't chase big horsepower numbers, they didn't overload it with electronics, they focused on usability, balance, and of course, most importantly, value. And when a bike works this well, changing it too quickly can actually make things worse, especially that it's working really well. So let's remind ourselves what the 450MT actually is. This is still a 449cc parallel twin engine running a 270-degree crank, which gives it far more character than a typical small capacity twin. It's A2 license friendly, which of course it opens up the market to a massive number of riders. You've got switchable rear ABS, which is a big deal if you genuinely ride off-road rather than just gravel tracks. It runs a 21-inch front wheel and an 18-inch rear, both spoked, which immediately tells you that this bike was designed with off-road use in mind. The seat height is adjustable, the weight is manageable, and when things go wrong off-road, it's a bike you can actually recover without feeling like it's trying to crush you. This isn't just an adventure-style motorcycle, it is a bike you can actually ride properly off-road. So, if the bike itself hasn't changed, what has changed for 2026? The biggest shift isn't the motorcycle, it's where and how CF Moto are pushing it. In the United States, the 450MT is sold as we all know it, the CF Moto Ibex 450, and 2026 is effectively this year CF Moto really commit to that platform in the market. That matters because it tells us it isn't a short-term experiment, it means better part support, more accessories, more aftermarket interest, and long-term confidence in the platform. In some regions, you'll see the 450MT is listed with different trims, most commonly the Rally and Sport version. Now, it's important to manage expectations here. Rally and Sport do not automatically mean more power, lighter weight, or an upgraded suspension. In most cases, these trims represent differences in styling, factory accessories, screens, protection, or even the wheel setup. They are best thought of equipment packages, not necessarily mechanical upgrades. And of course, the availability will vary depending on where you live. Another area where we are likely to see changes for 2026 are the visual updates. So new color options, updated graphics, and possibly a blacked out engine components by the looks of it. These are the most realistic changes for a new model year, and of course for some riders they genuinely matter, especially if you're keeping the bike long term or thinking about the resale value. But really, from a riding perspective, these changes don't alter how the bike really performs. And that kind of brings us on to what definitely hasn't changed. As of right now, there is no evidence of increased horsepower, no evidence of reduced weight, and of course there's no evidence of the suspension being upgraded. So if you rode a 2025 450MT and you switch to a 450MT from 2026, the riding experience would feel exactly the same. Which again leads me on to the big buying question. Should you buy now or should you wait? And really the honest answer is this. If you can get a good deal on a 2025 model, you are not missing out by buying it now. You're getting the same engine, the same chassis, and of course the same capability. So there's nothing wrong with buying the 2025 model. Waiting only really makes sense if you care about having the newest registration year, wanting a specific colour, or are hoping for a certain trim to land in your region. Of course, with the colour, as some of you may know, I have already put a new sticker kit on mine, so you can change that anyway. But really, from a performance point of view, waiting gives you no advantage. From my perspective, as someone who actually rides this bike off-road, this approach from CF Moto makes complete sense. The 450MT does not need a major redesign. It needs time, it needs refinement, and it needs riders putting real miles onto it. CF Moto are not rushing changes, tells me that they are very confident in what they have built, and honestly, that's such a good sign. So the truth about the 2026 CF Moto 450MT is very simple. It's not a new bike, it's not a downgrade, and it's definitely not a missed opportunity. It's still the same solid platform carried forward into a new model year, and that's exactly why it remains one of the most interesting mid-capacity adventure bikes that you can currently buy. And to really understand why that matters, you need to look at it from what most riders in this segment actually want versus what manufacturers think they want. Because not everyone is chasing the latest electronics package or the biggest horsepower figure or even the most complicated riding modes. A lot of riders really just want that the bike is predictable, a bike that they can learn on and of course grow with. And that is exactly where the 450MT gets a lot of things right. One of the biggest strengths of the bike is that it doesn't overwhelm you. The power delivery is usable and the throttle, it can definitely do with some improvement, but after the ECU being reflashed, it definitely feels a lot better. But overall, the bike doesn't constantly feel like it's trying to get away from you. And of course, when you're riding off-road, especially, if you're not a pro like myself, that matters far more than, the numbers that it actually produces on paper. So overall, confidence definitely builds faster on a bike like this. You trust it sooner, you try to push it earlier, and you learn more because of it. Another thing that often gets overlooked is how forgiving the 450MT really is. If you stall it or drop it or, end up in a situation where you need to pick it up on your own, it is definitely manageable. It doesn't feel like a 250, don't get me wrong, but it also doesn't feel like a full-size adventure bike that's actually, fighting you. The middle ground is exactly why so many people are drawn to it, and that has definitely not changed for 2026. Now, some people will say CF Moto should have upgraded the suspension or they should have added more power by now. And sure, on paper that sounds great, but upgrades like that also mean higher prices, more complexity, and of course, often less reliability long term. Right now, one of the biggest reasons that the 450MT is so attractive is its value. You're getting a lot of bike for the money, and the moment CF Moto start chasing spec sheet bragging rights, that value starts to disappear. There's also something to be said for the consistency. If you're buying a bike and planning to keep it for years, or you ride it hard, modify it, travel on it, knowing that the platform isn't changing every year is definitely a good thing. Parts availability stays strong, aftermarket support grows, and of course the knowledge builds within the community. And we're already seeing that with the 450MT. We're seeing a lot more accessories, more protection options, and even more suspension upgrades for those who want them. Which brings me on to saying, make sure to stay tuned for a future video because I will be testing the Rally Raid suspension to see how that really differs to your standard suspension. But yeah, anyway, this is really where the 2026 label actually works in your favor as a buyer, because if you buy a 2025 model now, you're not buying something that's instantly outdated. You're buying into a platform that's still current, and if you buy a 2026 model later, you're getting the same proven setup, just with a newer registration and of course the updated visuals. But either way, you're not losing. It's also worth mentioning that CF Moto are still relatively a young brand in this space, and instead of rushing constant updates, what they seem to be doing with the 450MT is watching how people actually use it. You know, how it gets ridden, where it's breaking, what riders complain about, and even what they praise. And that kind of feedback cycle usually leads to better long-term improvements rather than rushed yearly changes. So if you're someone who's been sitting on the fence waiting for the real sort of update, this is definitely your answer. The real update isn't a spec change, the real update is just confidence. Confidence that the bike works, that the platform is here to stay, and confidence that buying one now is not a mistake. Whether you choose the 2025 or the 2026 model, you're getting the same core experience. Bike that's capable off-road, comfortable enough on the road, and approachable without being boring. The balance is definitely hard to get right, and it is the reason why the 450MT continues to stand out. So basically, instead of asking what's new for 2026, the better question might actually be, is this bike already good enough for what I want to do? And for a lot of riders like myself, the answer to that is yes. But overall, that brings me to the end of this video talking about the CF Moto 450MT for the 2026 model year. But let me know in the comments below, are you waiting for the 2026 model year, or are you happy to pick up a 2025 and start riding it now? And of course, if you already own a 450MT, like myself, I would definitely love to hear your experience, especially if you've taken it properly off-road. If this video has helped, make sure to click that like button. It helps the channel out a lot. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to be notified every time I post a new video. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.